everyone, my name is Dr. Amna Husain, board-certified pediatrician, board-certified lactation consultant, and mom. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics to nerd out to, and that's food allergies, and in particular, early allergen introduction. So today we're going to do a Q&A style video. So I polled my Instagram followers on common questions that they might have about food allergies. And we've talked a lot about food allergies on my Instagram. So actually my followers are very well versed, but they did send in some really interesting questions, especially because as we know from the LEAP study, early introduction of peanuts can absolutely reduce the risk of developing a peanut allergy. From that, we've extrapolated that early introduction of all allergens can help decrease the risk of developing a food allergy. But it's not always easy to add in those other allergens. First up, let's talk about this question: when is an okay time to introduce tree nuts? So really, my advice is, depending on if you're puree feeding or if you're doing baby-led weaning, somewhere between 4 to 6 months, once your pediatrician has given you the green light to start solids, talk to your pediatrician, because usually, unless your child already has a very high atopic profile, may have very severe uncontrollable eczema, or maybe has a first-degree relative, like a sibling that has a food allergy, you might want to talk to your pediatrician about, I want to introduce potential allergenic foods. Some of those being tree nuts, cashews, pistachios, walnuts, hazelnuts. How is the best way to go about doing that? Well, you can absolutely use powders that would do that for you, or you can even introduce it yourself. So you can buy the nuts, grind them down yourself, and stir them into foods, or you can potentially buy them as nut butters, right? So walnut butter, cashew butter, and then stir that into baby's food. Those are different ways that you can introduce them. Now, not related to this question, but I will absolutely admit that it's a little bit harder to do that with certain other foods, like shellfish, for example, which I would consider sometimes to be a choking risk when you're trying to cut it up into bite-sized pieces, maybe mushing it in a way which does not sound appetizing, but perhaps that's the safest way to introduce it. I definitely think that there are ways to get creative here, and you can talk to your pediatrician about different ways, hoping to decrease the choking risk, but also still allow them to be fed and naturally introduced how you would introduce it to your child as often as you would, and use it in your own home. For example, there might be a family that hardly ever eats shellfish, and they may get around to introducing shellfish till much later in a child's life. And that might be something that could be worrisome to you, right? You're like, I want to introduce these foods early. So definitely talk to your pediatrician, because we can coordinate what's the safest time and what's the safest way to introduce these foods to decrease the choking risk. And then remember that you may not be able to get around to all the foods immediately. And that brings me to this next question. What about late introduction? So when it comes to late introduction, it's very hard to say what is late introduction. I think any time within the first year of life is a great time to introduce these foods, but will you introduce them all in one go? Probably not. So just do your best and try to add them in whenever you can, however you can. So if you do introduce fish a couple of times a week into your household, or you add seafood into rotation, then maybe just mush it up when baby's allowed to feed. Allow baby to try some too. If it's not able to be done because it's something you don't typically bring into your house, please don't stress. You can talk to your pediatrician about it and let them know that this is something that, hey, I may not get around to introducing. But I 100% understand this question where some people say pediatricians are not as well versed. Most docs should be recommending early introduction of potential allergenic foods. We do know that that can decrease the risk of developing food allergies, particularly for peanut allergy. And yes, we've been able to extrapolate some data from that and say we should be introducing all the other allergens early. Not all docs are as nerdy and talk a lot about starting solids, or may even know what baby-led weaning is and how to introduce solids safely, especially when it comes to mushing up or adding in these potential allergenic foods into your baby's diet. I admit that. There are a lot of docs for a lot of specialties that may not be the same as other docs and other specialties. Most of us who are in the outpatient world do try to stay up to pace. Attending conferences is a great way to do so. I know that this is, again, one of my personal sort of favorite things to talk about, especially as a food allergy parent myself. Learning about this and then being able to decrease the risk for other children developing food allergies, or to help live with a child who has a food allergy in a safe way. That's all things that are very interesting to me because they relate to me personally. It may not be the same for other doctors. I think that if you do have a question and you say, I have heard this from another doctor, what do you think about it? Is a very fair way to mention that. And I have been absolutely asked that question in regards to other things. I have heard about or seen this on Facebook, and it's a new sleep sack. What do you think of it? Because there's no way to keep up with all the different things out in the parenting industry. Which brings me to my next and last question on food allergies in this video, and that is low-cost ways to introduce these allergens. Because food allergy world has tapped into parenting marketing world, there are a lot of early introduction products for allergenic foods. Spoonful One was an example of a company. Ready Set is another example. And Little Mixins is another example. Like, the list goes on and on and on. When it comes to these products, they're great, but they can be costly. If you ever are concerned, definitely bring it up to your pediatrician, because they may be easy ways. They may have actually some samples in office willing to give out, but there are other low-cost ways to do so too. And that relates back to what we just mentioned. Grinding them at home into a powder, stirring them into their baby food, sprinkling it on top. For example, if you have pecan-crusted fish or something, you could absolutely do that for a baby. Mash it up, especially if it's a white fish, and be able to feed baby that. You got to get a little creative, and I 100% understand that. Or if that sounded absolutely disgusting to you, being able to stir in a smooth nut butter, like a cashew butter, into baby's oatmeal might be the way that you choose to do so. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just talk to your pediatrician that this is how you'd like to introduce it, and we can go over safety recommendations and talk you through that along the way. I hope this video was helpful. Please let me know if you have other food allergy questions or our early introduction to allergenic food related questions. I will definitely try to answer them below. Remember, no personal medical advice here, but absolutely happy to advise and educate as I can as a pediatrician. All right, guys, we'll see you again next week. Bye.